have limited government. Limited government's not the size of government. It's the intrusion and the scope of government. It's what it gets into. And see, that's what the Founding Fathers understood. Now, when you see that document, you see the philosophy that we call American exceptionalism, you know, it sounds to me like the founders were talking pretty strong about faith in God. And, of course, today we're told, oh, no, secular nation, godless constitution, Founding Fathers, atheist, agnostics, deists. You know, it is an interesting thing about these guys. Fortunately for us, everything is recorded. They did on paper what we do with cameras and tapes and VCRs. They wrote it all down. George Washington has 100 volumes of published writings. John Adams has 33. You have Ben Franklin with 40. You have Madison with 60. You have Hamilton with 60. I mean, these guys wrote everything down. And it's interesting that they even wanted to make sure that we had access to it. So in Article 1, Section 5, Paragraph 3 of the U.S. Constitution, they required that everything that happens on the floor of the House and Senate be recorded in public records so that we can see it, which means for that reason you can go this day to the records of Congress. You can go back to the very first day Congress ever met, or you can even look in a library and see that. If you go back to day one of the records of Congress, what you will find is the first time that our Founding Fathers, first time these guys got together, they opened with prayer, September the 6th, 1774. And as you read there in the records of Congress, you'll say, well, that's not a dinky little prayer, is it? No, it wasn't. According to historical records, the opening prayer session in Congress ran for right at 2 hours. Now, that is an interesting way for the founding. You know, we can't get this happening in religious bodies, but we get our Founding Fathers in Congress. And they didn't just pray that morning. John Adams wrote a lengthy letter describing what had happened to Abigail. John said that morning in Congress, not only did they pray, but they studied 4 chapters of the Bible in Congress. And he said during the Bible study, Psalm 35 so jumped off the page at them. God made that so alive to them, changed their whole attitude on the American Revolution. So what did he do? Well, in describing this to Abigail, here's what he told her. He said, Abigail, he said, I must beg you to read that psalm. Read the 35th Psalm to your friends. Read it to your fathers. He wanted everybody to know, us included, what God had shown them that morning in a Bible study in Congress. He wanted all of us to read Psalm 35. And he said, read it to your friends, read to your father. And her father was the pastor of their church, the Reverend William Smith. I mean, he wants everybody knowing what happened in Bible study that morning in Congress. But that didn't just stop there. Back in that very first Congress, as John told Abigail, he said, Abigail, he said, we've appointed a continental fast. He said, millions will be up on their knees at once before their great Creator, imploring His forgiveness and blessings, His smiles on American counsel and arms. He said, can you imagine the impact of having 3 million Americans pray and fast for what's happening? Now, remarkable stuff. That was the first of 15 times that Congress called the nation to prayer. That was a day of prayer and fasting. Congress also had days of prayer and thanksgiving. Usually after you had a day of prayer and fasting, 4, 5, 6 months later in the records of Congress, you'll say, the congressman will say, you remember when we prayed and fasted? Man, look at all the answers to prayer we've had. Let's have a day of thanksgiving. And so 15 times in the Revolution, it goes back and forth between a time of prayer and fasting, a time of prayer and thanksgiving. These guys were so into prayer that when you look at all the prayer proclamations issued by Founding Fathers, by 1815, we have 1,400 official prayer proclamations calling Americans to prayer. Doesn't sound like a bunch of secular guys. Sounded like faith was pretty important to them. Sounded like they wanted us to get a hold of God, make sure God. These are government calls to prayer. 1,400 by 1815? Absolutely. See, faith was important to these guys. Now, 2 years later, when these same guys got together and they did our Declaration of Independence, these 56 signers that we have, you know, that document is so remarkable. It has ideas never contained in any other previous written document. And you go, where'd they get their ideas? Well, again, because they are writers, they tell us where they got their ideas. I mean, if you go and look at the writings, for example, of Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson, if you look at John Adams there, that's James Wilson. If you look at this man over here, Benjamin Rush, they all tell us that they copied the Declaration out of this work, the 2 Treatises of Government by John Locke. Now, it used to be that if you went to school in America in government class, we always studied the 2 Treatises of Government because all these guys said the Declaration. Matter of fact, this guy on the left, Richard Henry Lee, now he's the guy that made the motion in Congress on June the 5th that we separate from Great Britain. As a result of that motion, they said, well, let's get a document together. So they appointed the 5 guys at the table to write the Declaration. Richard Henry Lee's the guy who got this whole thing started. Richard Henry Lee said that they, quote, copied the Declaration from those 2 Treatises of Government by John Locke. Now, that's why we used to study it in school, because if you're going to study government, you need to know where it came from. If you're going to know where it came from, you got to study John Locke. But we don't study that today. We haven't studied that probably in a good 40 or 50 years. I wonder why. Because the document, the book, now that book's small. It's less than 400 pages thick, less than 400 pages long, but it's less than an inch thick. If you look at that document, you will find that that book cites the Bible over 1,500 times to show the proper operation of civil government. We say, whoa, I thought government was secular. Well, good thing for us, they didn't think so. They think God should be involved in everything. That little book, 1,500 Bible verses on how government should operate, and it was from there that they copied the Declaration. No wonder we've lasted longer than any other nation. We had a different foundation, different philosophy at the beginning. This is what caused American exceptionalism. You'll find that throughout the Revolution. Matter of fact, by the time you get to 1781, the Battle of Yorktown, the British lay down their arms. We now are officially out from under the laws of the kings. Now, the reason that becomes important is prior to that, we had laws. For example, one of the laws that had been put by the kings on America, even 150 years earlier, said, if you live in America, you cannot print any Bible in the English language in America. Great Britain had a national, worldwide denomination for them. Whatever the king was, if the king's Anglican, will be Anglican. If the king's Catholic, will be Catholic. Whatever Bible he uses, that's what we all use. That's what he tells us. Well, as a result of the American Revolution, we're no longer under that particular law. So within 1 month of the Battle of Yorktown, the plan is set forth to produce the first English language Bible in America. First time America's ever been able to print its own Bible. That Bible came off the presses in 1782. When it came off the presses 11 months later, it's called the Bible of the American Revolution, one of the rarest books in the world. As Glenn mentioned, we're very blessed. We own about 100,000 documents from before 1812. I own thousands of the handwritten documents of George Washington, Jefferson, etc. And this book, they printed 10,000 copies of it. There's only 28 left in the world today. I have one. Library of Congress has one. It's a very rare little document. This is the first Bible printed in English in America. Now, interesting thing about this particular Bible is, you know who printed this? The Congress of the United States printed it. Whoa, the Founding Fathers printed the first Bible in English? Founding Fathers did that? Yeah, why would they do that? They tell us. It's in the records of Congress. They said that this Bible is, quote, a neat addition to the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools, end quote. Whoa, time out. I thought these guys didn't want religion in schools. Yeah, you know, the Supreme Court told us that on June the 25th of 1963 in two cases, Abbott and Ship and Murray Curlett. And we think that the way it's been for the last 50 years since the court told us is the way history is. No, no, no. There's a reason that for 350 years before that, we always used the Bible in education. It was not a problem for anybody, but it has been because, see, we don't know our history. As a matter of fact, here's the actual handwritten document from Congress. It's a neat addition to the Holy Scriptures for the use of schools. That Bible even contains a congressional endorsement in front. It says, resolved, the United States and Congress assembled recommend this edition of the Bible to the inhabitants of the United States. I mean, this is Congress doing that. Well, it was the very next year that these guys, these three Americans, signed the peace treaty to secure what they had announced back in the Declaration. I mean, these three guys here, you got John Jay on the left, John Adams in the center, Ben Franklin on the right. The peace treaty you can see today, it's at the State Department, 6th floor, John Quincy Adams State Drawing Room, Washington, D.C. You can see the treaty. 10 articles in the treaty, and this is what secured our independence. You see the three signatures are at the bottom, John Adams and Ben Franklin and John Jay. It's interesting to see what our founding fathers put as the title on the document that secured our independence. 7 years ago, they did the Declaration. Now they secure it. Look at the title. In the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. I could be wrong, but that sounds religious to me. Oh, no, the founding fathers wouldn't want under God in the pledge. Oh, they wouldn't want in God we trust. As we've just seen federal judge Barbara Crabb say, oh, no, founding fathers wouldn't want a national day of prayer. That's way too religious. Really? The document that secures our independence, that's the title on the document? You see, that's why John Adams, who was there from start to finish, John Adams signed the Declaration, he signed the peace treaty. John Adams said it unequivocally. He said the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. Now, this is as clear as you can possibly say it, but today we are determined to prove exactly the opposite. I love collecting articles like this. This is an article from the LA Times. It's called America's Unchristian Beginning. It said the founding fathers were deists who rejected the divinity of Jesus. Now, this talks about Christianity because most of the founding fathers were Christians, but their point is, oh, no, the founding fathers weren't religious. They were all secular. They were atheists, agnostics, and deists. That's why a whole chain of newspapers on the East Coast ran this one. The authors of the Declaration were enemies of Christ. They were anti-religious. And you get professors like Stephen Morris, who ran this in National Wire Service. He said the founding fathers were not Christians. I don't care what John Adams said. He doesn't have a clue what he's talking. I just love the arrogance of these guys. I've got a PhD, so John doesn't know what he's talking about. He only lived through it. He was an eyewitness. He was there. I wasn't, but I'm telling you, You know, what arrogance that we now look back at history and determine that because that guy doesn't like what they said, that they didn't say it. Well, a lot of people buy into that. I was recently at Duke University Law School, and that's a very elite school, very sharp kids there. And I put this picture up in front of them. I said, who do you recognize up there? And all the students found for me Jefferson. They all found Franklin, and that is exactly where it stopped. I said, whoa, time out. There are 56 guys up there. You've given me 2? Give me some more. Well, I don't know who they are. So I said, let me help you. Let me just take you across the front row. Let me give you some little cues here. This man is Richard Henry Lee. Right beside him is George Clinton. Still moving across the front row, Sam Adams. You go to Charles Carroll. The guy in the light brown jacket is Robert Morris. Right beside him is Benjamin Rush. The guy leaning on his elbow there is Elbridge Gerry. Right beside him is Robert Treatpain. And I can keep going through the other 54. And they said, who? Never heard of those guys before. Isn't it interesting that today we've all been trained to recognize the 2 least religious founding fathers? You see, we can find Jefferson and Franklin, and of course all the other founders were just like Jefferson and Franklin. Were they really? Do you know out of the 56 guys who signed the Declaration of Independence, 29 of those guys held seminary and Bible school degrees? It's not bad for a bunch of atheists to have Bible school degrees, and apparently that's what's going on back then. See, today what we do is we take the exception and teach it. We don't teach the rule. We'll teach the 2. We won't teach the 29. And that's just the way it is. But we used to never buy this in previous generations because we knew our own history too well. There's a great textbook back from 1848 we used in public schools for generations called Lives of the Signers. We had 4, 5, 6 pages on every single signer of the Declaration. We knew their faith. We knew their character. We knew their family. Matter of fact, we knew what it cost them. 7 of these guys did not live to see what they wanted us to have. 3 were prisoners of war. 3 lost their wives. 4 lost their kids. 17 lost their estates. We knew all that. We don't know that anymore. But see, we used to. There's even a textbook that we had called Wives of the Signers. We saw what the price they paid. I mean, how many were prisoners of war and died as a result of standing? Now, we reprinted those books and they're out, but this is just old school books we used to have. See, the way we do things today, it's very opposite. We would never talk about people like John Witherspoon because signer of the Declaration, he's the Reverend Dr. John Witherspoon. Best known gospel minister in his generation, has more than a dozen volumes of published writings as a minister. He's also responsible for 2 American editions of the Bible, including this one right here. This is original from 1791. That is America's very first family Bible. This is done by a signer of the Declaration so that families can have Bible studies together. Now, we also have other signers of the Declaration. You see here Charles Thompson. Charles Thompson. Now, Charles Thompson's a noted theologian. As a matter of fact, Charles Thompson is responsible for this Bible right here. This is the original. It's called Thompson's Bible. You can still buy it today in any major bookstore. This is the first translation of the Greek Septuagint into English. It took Charles 25 years to make this translation from Greek into English, one of America's most scholarly translations of the Bible, and it came from a founding father. We just had no idea that Thompson's Bible was a founding father. We have the same thing with Benjamin Rush. Benjamin Rush is considered one of the 3 most notable founding fathers. Matter of fact, John Adams said, among all the founding fathers, you have George Washington, Ben Franklin, and Benjamin Rush, and we have never heard of the guy. He's a huge civil rights leader, started the first abolition society in America, started the first black denomination in America. He's called the father of public schools under the Constitution, started 5 universities, 3 of them still go today. He is the first professor of chemistry in the United States. He did the first faith-based prison reform movement. He started the first school for women. I mean, it's unbelievable what this guy did. With all the other stuff that he did, and he signed the Declaration, ratified the Constitution, served in 3 presidential administrations. We've never heard of him. He's director of the U.S. Mint. He is the man that started the Sunday school movement in America. So that religious organization that still exists today, started by a founding father. He also is the guy who produced this work right here. This is the first Bible ever mass-produced in America. It's called a stereotype Bible. He did this because he started the first Bible Society in America. This is the Constitution for the first Bible Society. So here's the signer of the Declaration, starts our first Bible Society, publishes our first mass-produced Bible, and we have him down as one of our anti-religious founding fathers, a guy atheist, agnostic, deist. Now, of course, you will recognize folks like John Adams. I mean, John Adams, everybody knows. HBO did the special on him. If you've never seen an actual John Adams letter, let me show you one. I brought original letter here. This is just an example. He has 33 volumes of these writings, signed on the back here, John Adams. You can see right there. What I want you to see is the bottom paragraph of this letter. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. I want you to see in John Adams' own writing what he says here. You read the bottom. If you're close, you can see the line there.